What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Points Per Podcast. My name's Eric. That's my co-host, Will. And you've seen the title. You've seen the thumbnail. We're mock drafting today. This is our first entry into the mock draft space since the NFL draft has gone down. We have the landing spots. We know where everybody's going. And I don't want to waste too much time. So, Will, you excited for this one?
Excited isn't really the word I would use, but I am at least curious to see how this is going to end up.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting draft, to say the least. This class, as everybody has told you to this point, I'm sure is not the most exciting, but I think that there's value to be had, and I hope that that's where we can kind of help you guys out in navigating where to find those value pockets in the draft. So, Will, since I'm introing the thing, I'm going to let you start us off at the 101. Probably pretty obvious, but if you want to give us some landing spot details and maybe some other information about where this player's going.
Well, everybody knows this spot has been kind of locked in since the beginning of the process. It's Jeremiah Love. We saw that he recently landed at 3rd overall to the Arizona Cardinals, which insane draft capital for a running back. We haven't seen anything like that since Saquon Barkley going 2nd overall back then. It's a curious landing spot because they had Tyler Algier, they gave him the payday, and then he immediately got Algiered again. And now Jeremiah Love is going to take the bulk of the opportunity out here. And that's kind of how I feel about this landing spot. He's going to be here on a team where I'm not going to say there's not a ton of talent. That offense does have talent, but it's just a weird situation, not a great team itself. But he's going to probably get the bulk of the opportunities out of everybody that is involved in this offense. But yeah, I mean, he's good on the passing downs, good catching the ball, good running the ball out the backfield. I just don't see too many opportunities where he's not going to be on the field, except if they decide to give Tyler Algier the goal line carries. And even if that's the case, that receiving work is going to really mitigate all of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's something that we talked about in our last video where we broke down the landing spots. Even if Algier does vulture some touchdown work, like you mentioned, Love is going to thrive in the receiving game on a team that's going to be in a lot of losing game scripts. And another thing that I mentioned in that last video is that there have been 8 running backs drafted in the top 10 in the last 15 years. And not a single one has finished worse than RB16 in points per game during their rookie season. So I don't think we have any floor concerns here with Jeremiah Love either.
Absolutely not.
All right. We don't have to spend any more time there. 102 is kind of where the draft starts, I think, in most leagues. Also, to clarify, in terms of settings, we're viewing this as like a 12-team, half PPR, super flex, half-point tight end premium, 4-point per passing touchdown, start 10 draft, just so you can get the entire spectrum on there so you guys understand where we're coming from with these picks. But with that, at the 102, I am going to take one of the big 3 receivers, and I'm going to start it with Jordan Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some, I feel like, debate as far as what this landing spot means for him. I think that this is a great landing spot. In terms of just his profile specifically, he graded out as my wide receiver 2 pre-draft, right behind Mekhi Lemon, but it was neck and neck anyway. But then after seeing the discrepancy in draft capital and also based on this landing spot, which I view to be a good one, I'm willing to put Tyson up in my wide receiver 1 category for rookie drafts. Even though he won't be the wide receiver 1 on his own team there in New Orleans, I think that's kind of overrated. He's going to be joining a Kellen Moore offense that led the league in pace of play last year. And Moore's offenses across multiple teams, every time he's been the play caller, that's 7 total seasons. He's been top 5 in pace of play in 6 of those. So this is a trend that, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think there's going to be a ton of plays run in that offense. And so there's going to be plenty of fantasy points to go around between these top 2 guys.
I 100% agree. This is the same pick I would have made right here. I think there's just a lot of opportunity out there in terms of targets. Their number 2 last year was Juwan Johnson. And I think Jordan Tyson is going to be better than Juwan Johnson at the next level. And I do want to say, he's not going to be the wide receiver 1, but I think this is only going to help things for him and Chris Olave to open things up. But I also want to say it's not a secret that Chris Olave does kind of have a tough time staying on the field from time to time as well. So
they both do. I think it's going to be a blue tent off between them.
Yeah. But I think just the injury upside for both players in this instance is going to be pretty high.
That's very true and a good point to make for sure. All right, where are you going to go at the 103?
I juggled with this one and I struggled with this one for a little bit because I want to go with my boy here and I'm going to stick with it for here. But I think there is a discussion to be had for this spot for also for Makai Lemon. But I'm going with Carnell Tate here just because he is going to an offense who I will say with Brian Daboll as the new offensive coordinator, he does create fantasy friendly situations. He's not the best in real life football instances as we saw last year, but in terms of what he can do with creating these passing game situations and just getting an offense going and being fantasy productive, he is good at putting situations together. The biggest question mark here is can Carnell Tate handle being the wide receiver one for a team? If you ask Malik Neighbors, he would tell you no.
That's true. He did say that.
He did. But it's going to be interesting to see if he is able to make that transition going forward because we have seen a couple guys from Ohio State who weren't the wide receiver one in their offenses that were able to come out and still really impress at the next level. Can Carnell Tate be the next in that line of succession? I'm not exactly sure if that's going to be the case, but in terms of everything you would want from an NFL wide receiver, he's got all of it. He's got, the size, he's got the hands, he's got very good hands, great contested catching, good separation, polished route running. It just is a matter of if he can withstand that volume and if Cam Ward is going to be able to play up to that level of play that's going to be required for him to earn, this kind of draft capital.
Cam Ward's the big question for me.
Yeah.
I would have gone the same direction. Tate would be my 103 as well. He's clearly the most talented receiver on that team. I don't think there's any question marks about whether he's going to be the go-to guy and get all of the opportunity, especially given he went 4th overall. My main thing is, one, is Cam Ward good enough? And two, like specifically, I feel like Tate really thrives in an offense that operates on time and in rhythm, and that's not Cam Ward's style. I'm not saying that Tate can't, be useful in the kind of backyard football realm or like as the play breaks down, but that type of offense leads to a lot of inconsistent fantasy production from week to week. And so that's the only thing I really worry about there.
I agree.
But I agree with you that Tate belongs at the 103. I hate that I have the 104 and I have to make this decision. Makai Lemon has been my wide receiver one, pre-draft and way further back into the offseason and even during the season. But just based on the landing spot, it makes me nervous. I think I'll probably go Mendoza here in a super flex league. Not super like enthralled by his fantasy ceiling. But I do think that there is a level of floor to be had by just taking the quarterback in a super flex draft. You could also kind of make the opposite argument that considering how many kind of QB2s that hover right around this value range it exist currently in the dynasty landscape, that maybe his floor is a little bit lower. But I do think that in a lot of leagues, he could be the 102. And so maybe if he's available at the 104, it's within reason to try to trade back or find somebody in your league that's QB needy. But I do like the situation that he walks into. I think that the Raiders are on the up. I think that Clint Kubiak is going to run a great system. And we saw, obviously, him turn Sam Darnold into a Super Bowl champion. What did that mean for fantasy? He was kind of a mid-level QB2. It's about what I expect from Mendoza, at least in the short term. But in this draft, that's kind of the best we got.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I'm a firm believer that we will see Fernando Mendoza play at some point this season. He's also a pretty big believer in it himself. He said like he could start in September, October, November. It'll be exciting to see when he actually does get out there on the field. But in terms of situation, it's a much better situation in Las Vegas than it was last year. So cautiously optimistic.
Absolutely. All right, take us to the 105.
And you made this one easier for me. I'm just going to go Makai Lemon here. Like you said, he tested out extremely high amongst the wide receivers in this class. And when you're looking at the situation, he lands in Philadelphia, which with another pick as well this year with Eli Stowers. So the room is a little bit crowded at the moment, especially with the whole A.J. Brown situation. But I think that even if A.J. Brown were to stick around, Lemon is going to be at least the number 3 option there, and he is going to get some play out there on the field. There is also Sean Mannion there, so the offense is going to be different. It's not going to be this Kevin Patullo slog that it was last year. Hopefully we will actually see a little bit more action out of there. But I'm a believer that, one, Jalen Hurts can bounce back. There's been a lot of questions about him, his style of play. and specifically that his sort of style of play may not mesh well with the Makai Lemon and that sort of player that he is out of the slot where he really thrives in the middle of the field. There's the whole, Jalen can't throw to the middle of the field thing people like to say. I think that's just more of if you get somebody who is really good at thriving in those sections, things are going to be fine at the end of the day. And Makai Lemon is one talented enough to handle the volume of a wide receiver one. If AJ Brown were to leave, he and Devonta Smith would complement each other extremely well. But with just that being said, I'm buying into the talent here, and I'm hoping that even with a crowded room, it's still going to be a good offense over there.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at as well. It's disappointing, but there's still upside to be had, and you just got to trust that the talent's going to win out in that type of scenario. Do you feel like this is still a tier break after the 105, or have things gotten kind of muddied after the draft?
I think things have gotten a little muddied, especially with the guy I feel like you're going to go with next. Honestly, the next two guys, it's just really strange in this spot right here. I feel like the tier break is maybe after Carnell Tate. And then right in this group, it gets really kind of confusing.
I think that's actually a fair point. So Love's in a tier by himself. I do think that Tyson and Tate are probably in their own kind of mini tier, half tier. I would still have these guys above the rest, but it is close as we get into the 106. And I wonder if you have this predicted for me. But my 106 is going to be Casey Concepcion. Let me make sure I have this pulled up. Yeah, he's still my 106. Really liked his first year production and his third year production. His year 2 at NC State was weird. The coaching staff utilized him very strangely. That was the year that Justin Jolly, the tight end there, outproduced him, and Concepcion kind of just fell into this gadget role. But we saw that he handled volume and produced at an incredible level in his freshman year, and then he was able to transfer away from NC State, get to Texas A&M, and show that he's more than just that gadget guy. He can play downfield. He can run big boy routes. And so I really like the prospect. People are also kind of up and down on this Cleveland landing spot. A lot of mouths to feed with Judy, with Fannin especially. Denzel Boston gets drafted there as well. But I do think that he just has the potential to be the best option in that group. And also, I kind of want to look to the future with this one. This is something that we discussed in our last video as well, that this Cleveland Browns team is going to be bad. They're probably going to be in the run-in for a top 3 pick next year, and they could have a totally different quarterback situation heading into 2027 that could really, change the range of outcomes in the positive direction for a guy like Concepcion.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think he steps in as one of the better route runners in this class as well. So I think he's going to find some success in getting separation and stuff like that. It really just comes down to who's going to be throwing the ball out there and if they can get the ball to him. But I believe in him as a player. And like you said, who knows what the situation is going to be walking into year 2 for Casey Concepcion. And I feel like that's going to be the story for a lot of these players that we're going to be talking about going forward.
I think you're absolutely right. So take us away at the 107. Who you got for us?
At the 107, I'm going with Jadarian Price. Yeah. I just think that he's a guy, he landed in a good spot in Seattle, to be honest with you. It seems like it's crowded because Zach Charbonnet took a lot of weird work away from Kenneth Walker last year. But Zach Charbonnet is probably not going to be an issue for Jadarian Price owners until like November at this point in terms of his recovery and him getting back on the field. And with that being said, Jadarian Price is going to have a lot of opportunity to make something happen within that time. Now, it's weird when I talk about his receiving production. I saw there was a Sal Vetri video. I watched one of his where he was talking about Price, and he talked about how his receptions, he averaged like 15 yards per reception or something ridiculous, something crazy.
Yeah.
But it's based off of like 15 catches he had across his entire college career.
Yeah, it's such little volume for him.
But it's also, he's coming from a place where he had Jeremiah Love in front of him, so he really didn't have to go out there and catch passes. I was about to say pass catches, because you got a guy like that who is as good at doing that. You don't really need him out there on the field to do that. So we may see an angle of his game that we hadn't seen before in terms of that. Even with like Kenneth Walker in the past, he was throwing the ball more than we even thought he was going to get, especially in 2024. So when looking at Jadarian Price, I'm seeing a lot of opportunity where he can get a lot of momentum and be the RB1 for this team, including the time when Zach Charbonnet is here. So I'm optimistic about Jadarian Price, but it's tough with the sample size that he has to really be confident about it. But in a draft like this, when you got a guy with opportunity like this, I wouldn't even be mad if you took him a little bit earlier than this, to be honest with you.
And I think you'll see that. I think the biggest takeaway is that all of these drafts are going to be different. The consensus doesn't even really exist. And so I think it's going to make for some fun drafts. But I think you covered all of the bases on Price really, really well. I don't need to expand upon it. I, I didn't love him as a prospect necessarily, but the opportunity is absolutely there, especially with the capital and the landing spot. So I'm a fan, and that's where I would have gone as well at the 107. I, especially in a half point tight end premium, am probably just going to bite the bullet and take Kenyon Sadiq at the 108. Decent profile, not great. Athletically outstanding, one of the most athletic tight ends we've ever seen. Killed the combine. Whether or not he can stay on the field in all formations is questionable. He's not the best blocker, but he's not like a minus blocker either necessarily. And then he goes to the Jets, which one, just a tough situation, but also a lot of mouths to feed now that they have Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall already there. They bring in Sadiq. They also bring in Omar Cooper Jr. In the draft. So it muddies the waters, but it's tough, especially in this format with half point tight end premium, to not kind of bet on that upside. I think Sadiq has a really low floor and a really high ceiling, and just whether or not he hits either end of that spectrum is kind of up for debate. But in a class like this is just kind of where I feel like he has to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a weird situation over there in New York, but I think that he is going to be fine at some point. It may not be next year, but I will say with Geno Smith, he does target tight ends a lot, historically speaking. So maybe we get to see the Geno Smith of old. I'm not too confident in that myself either, but I do
Yeah.
think that Kenyon Sadiq will be a good player at some point. It just may not be immediate impact.
Yeah, and that's true for a lot of tight ends just generally also. So, maybe we be patient with this one. Could be a similar situation to what we talked about with Concepcion also. The Jets probably won't be very good. They could find themselves picking high in the draft next year. Could we see them with a quarterback upgrade and potentially a coaching staff upgrade heading into 2027? I think that's within reason, and that would change things for Kenyon Sadiq for the positive. So, all that considered, let's move on to the 109. Where are you going to take us?
With the 109, I'm sticking with the tight ends and I'm going with Eli Stowers right here.
Okay. All right.
I
I like it.
I feel like out of the two, he's more consistent as a tight end in terms of receiving the ball. He's probably the worst blocker out of the two, so that's going to be something that holds him back a little bit. But again,
Yeah.
with the landing point in Philadelphia, I think that at some point he is going to be a big, focal point of this team. I don't know if it'll be immediately next year. Dallas Goedert got some really weird usage last year, but going forward, who knows if he's even going to stick around or stay with the team, and just how this team is going to be structured. Him and Mekhi Lemon sort of function in similar parts of the field, in similar roles, but at the same time, we don't exactly know which one of those two is going to win out in terms of getting that early opportunity and getting that chance to establish that role. And also, if both of them do serve that role and AJ Brown were to leave, I don't really think it matters because that just gives them two different options, especially with a guy like Jalen Hurts, who isn't exactly known for throwing the ball super far down the field at all times. Having two guys who are efficient in that sort of field and range of the field could be very good for this offense as well. Like I said, I'm just really more optimistic about Sean Mannion running this offense. It's more of a question mark just because past performance, we don't really know a whole lot. But I think that it does have a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that, the range for him starts here. I did have him a little bit later, but I like everything you said. I think maybe even more on like the positive end of the spectrum. I just don't think he even plays the same position as Dallas Goedert. Like he's not going to be an
Yeah.
inline Y tight end. And so if they feel like Stowers is a better receiving option than, Dontavian Wicks or Hollywood Brown or whoever their other kind of ancillary pieces are, maybe they just go 12 personnel and have him play in the slot, but then that would push Mekhi Lemon out wide unless they do like condensed splits. I don't know. It's confusing. I'm not sure how it's going to play out necessarily, but I do trust that Philly will put their best players on the field and have the most talented roster out there. And I think Stowers could potentially be in that group. I also am working under the assumption that AJ Brown is gone and probably that Goddard is gone after this year. So
Yeah.
things might open up in the future. So I don't mind that one bit. At the 110, unfortunately, I think I have to go back to the Jets and
Yeah.
take Omar Cooper Jr. Didn't mind his profile. I think he's relatively interesting. He didn't get a lot of opportunity early on in his college career, but then he kind of had that breakout season with Indiana this past year. The most exciting part of his profile is definitely what he can do with the ball in his hands, whether you're looking at missed tackles forced or yak data. He's really, really good in that category at creating extra yards after the catch. Similar to what we just talked about with Stowers and Lemon, I think Cooper and Sadiq occupy kind of similar areas of the field and have redundant-ish skill sets, and so that's where the kind of red flags and question marks start to begin. But I think he's talented, and I think that there is kind of a role for that type of player within this Jets offense. And again, upside for the future if they end up with a better quarterback, maybe better coaching staff as well. It's just tough. It gets tough early this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think with Omar Cooper, it's splash plays galore. I'm not sure how much consistency we're going to see there, especially with the Jets.
Yeah,
But, it's one of them drafts.
indeed. All right, take us to the 111.
Speaking of being one of those drafts, I'm going with the guy who was drafted on day 2. I'm actually thinking about taking Antonio Williams at this spot.
Okay, I don't mind
Yeah.
it.
I think it's just somebody who is paired up with Jaden Daniels in an offense that should be a lot better than it was last year, with Jaden Daniels not getting hurt. But I think with just looking at the profile, Antonio Williams, he was a high 4-star coming out of high school. Even when looking at his profile, he was still pretty productive last year with dealing with rib injuries and all things of the sort. And the year prior, looked really good. So
Yeah,
I think this is a guy who, had he not had that little bit of a down year due to injury, he may have been drafted even sooner than this. This is just injury tax on that. I think when looking at him, he's in an offense paired up with Jaden Daniels. He's got the opportunity with only like Terry McLaurin really give him any type of target competition out there. It's just, and then the whole Brandon Ayuk situation, that's just a weird situation. It got even weirder, I think, recently. He's not picking up people's phone calls anymore, like at all.
yeah, it's wild.
So when looking at that, we're looking at a guy who's possibly going to be the wide receiver too, in what should be a better offense. So, and run by David Blau as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that offense ran by him. Things
Yeah.
should be a lot more open.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. This is actually the draft slot that I had him taken in. I had Stowers a little bit further back, so the order is a little bit mixed up. But I agree that he deserved to be in this first round conversation. If he can be the wide receiver 2 on a Commander's offense tied to Jaden Daniels, that's huge. And I think he's. I brought up this comparison in the last video, but I think he's kind of Tyler Boyd-y. If people kind of remember the type of player that Tyler Boyd was for that Cincinnati team, I think he can command a lot of volume. I think he can really do his best work in that short to intermediate areas of the field. And he's a solid enough blocker that I don't think they're going to take him off the field for rundowns or anything like that. I think he's just really well-rounded. And so I think that's deserving of the 111.
Absolutely.
Man, you're making me take the players I don't want to, though. I wanted to take Antonio Williams. Now I got to take Ty Simpson at the 112.
Yikes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should make the case for him since I'm taking him. He was taking it at the 13th overall pick. That's huge compared to what we expected pre-draft. We thought he was going to be a second-round guy. And he goes to the Rams, which, bittersweet in the sense that he's not going to play right away. Matthew Stafford is going to be their guy. They're playing for a Super Bowl. We're only really going to see him maybe in some preseason action, or if they're winning in blowouts or something like that, he might come on the field. And we hope to see flashes in those scenarios, because if we see flashes from Ty Simpson in those brief moments that he gets on the field, that might be enough to kind of buoy his dynasty value for the long term, considering he is tied to the Rams and tied to Sean McVay. That's kind of another question that I have also is, will McVay and Stafford retire at the same time? Because if they do, then the Ty Simpson bet becomes a totally different one, and one that I'm way less interested in. But that's all kind of speculation and up in the air. If McVay sticks around long term, then I think Ty Simpson definitely has upside in that offense. We're just going to have to be patient and wait for it.
Yeah, it's not the prettiest pick in the world, but it's probably where I would have taken him as well, especially in Superflex. You need quarterbacks, and I will say that Matt Stafford has struggled with his health from time to
Hmm.
time. He's getting older and older every year,
Yeah.
and there may be sometimes we do get to see Ty Simpson out there. With the like you said, I hope that we get to see something out of Ty Simpson, and I also hope that that's something we see is enough to convince Sean McVay to stick around because he
Yeah.
didn't really seem like he was the happiest about this pick himself. But
I do wonder. So there's been a lot of speculation about that and some stuff coming out about the Rams just trying to keep it under wraps that they were even interested in Ty Simpson at all because they knew that if other teams found out that they were interested in him, that would boost his value and potentially he might get drafted ahead of them. Um, and also, obviously, McVay has to cater to the wants and needs of Stafford, their starting quarterback, as they try to win a Super Bowl. He doesn't want to be hyping up this other quarterback. Uh, when he wants to keep Stafford happy. So
that's
I think
fair.
it's a little wishy washy, considering what we saw in that first press conference, what that might actually mean in terms of McVay's feelings about Ty Simpson. I hope that he was on board as well, but I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, it stands to be seen at this point.
So that'll round out our first round. I think we'll probably just do 2 rounds. You want to start us off here in the beginning of the second?
Yeah, I'm gonna start off the second. I'm looking at Denzel Boston here. I think I'm finally gonna pull the trigger on that one. Lands in
Yeah.
Cleveland, seventh pick in the second round. I just think, like you said, it's kind of open opportunity out there. We don't really know who's gonna be the guy for this offense. And Denzel Boston, he reminds me of sort of like a Kenny Galladay type player. Doesn't get a whole
Hmm.
lot of separation, good down the field. But it's one of those where I'm not super optimistic that he's going to be the guy right away. At least in this infrastructure right now that Cleveland is,
Yeah.
they don't really have the time to set up those long plays or, I'm not even sure if they really have the personnel to make those long plays happen at this point.
Yeah.
But I am confident for the future. I'm hoping that he can at least grow into his role with this offense and just sort of stick around for a while because that's all we really can do with these guys.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I don't see a path to immediate production, but I'm down to at least see what the long term looks like. I like the Kenny Galladay comp. I think that's a pretty good one. I think he's like his upside is like Alec Pierce.
Mhm.
Downside worse than that.
Yeah.
um, and in an offense like this, that's a little sketchy, especially considering what we saw out of Fannin volume wise and what I hope to see out of Concepcion volume wise. But I'm not even arguing against you. I had him in the same spot. So it's just tough.
Yeah, I'd say he's anywhere from Alec Pierce to Dorio Green Beckham.
I hope some people know who that is. I hope that we're not the only ones that get that reference, but I love that. All right. At the 202, I think I'm going to go with Jonah Coleman. I know that he got drafted a little bit later, day 3 guy, and he goes to an uncertain situation. But I think that in this class and just where we are on the board, I'm willing to buy into that uncertainty. Jonah Coleman pre-draft and I guess still now was my RB2, and I don't know. They just extended Dobbins, so I
Mhm.
don't expect Coleman to supplant him outside of injury in terms of like the lead running back position. In terms of pass catching, I think most people would probably expect Harvey to maintain that role, but I wasn't super impressed with what we saw from Harvey last year, and I'm not sure that the coaching staff was either. I think that's kind of part of the reason that they brought in Coleman. And also, I think that Coleman gives them a little bit of versatility in terms of what the defenses should be expecting from them. Like, I think you can hand the ball to Jonah Coleman and he can run it up the gut pretty effectively, but also he can be a viable pass catcher. Whereas Harvey, you're kind of showing your cards a little bit. And so I think maybe the probability that he becomes fantasy viable in year 1 is pretty low, but I think that it's within the range of outcomes. And then certainly as we get into year 2, I would imagine that J.K. Dobbins moves on and maybe he supplants Harvey as that RB1 in that offense.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think it's a high upside offense. I think with J.K. Dobbins, historically, he has had a really tough go at things in the league in terms of staying healthy.
Yeah.
So we may see him out on the field sooner rather than later. I think if Harvey is there, like you said, it should be a committee as well. But even if something were to happen to the two of them, Jonah Coleman could, potentially take that RB1 spot.
Yeah, for sure. All right, 2-3. What do you got for us?
2, 3. I want to do it. I really do. I'm taking my boy. I'm taking Chris Bell right here.
Okay.
I just think there's a lot of upside in Miami right now while they're rebuilding. They kind of tore the whole team down, and right now Malik Washington is the only real target competition. I'd assume, I guess, Caleb Douglas as well, the guy who got taken before Caleb
Yeah.
Bell. All right, is it Caleb Douglas? Are they both named Caleb?
Chris Bell and Caleb Douglas.
Chris Bell. Why am I? Yeah,
You got yourself
I'm
all
all
in a
turned around.
yeah.
But Caleb Douglas got taken before him, and that was a guy that we saw his name come off the board. And we're like, who is that guy?
hmm
But I think Chris Bell, he was someone who was in first round talks before the injury, before the ACL tear, and kind of before people got a real look at his game to see that he is more of a slant guy, more of a drag man. But at the same time, that is a role that they will need in this offense. It's just, I'm optimistic that he will at least get some volume within this offense that's going to need people that can catch the ball, and he is going to be one of those guys.
Yeah, I think that this is probably where his market value is going to settle out. And I know that you don't disagree with me in what I'm about to say,
Hmm.
in that I just like really hated his analytical profile.
Yeah.
Um, I personally just couldn't bring myself to click the button on him this high. I don't think it's wrong. I think that the opportunity is there. I think that this offense is deprived of really anybody that can do anything. And in terms of a guy with the type of size speed combination that he has with that type of runway, I fully understand shooting for upside there. But man, he just graded out so poorly in my wide receiver model. Like I have a bias. I can't do it.
No, that's 100% fair. It's not the prettiest game to watch. Dude's fearless across the middle, though. That's probably why he's in the
That's
position he
true.
is right now. But
That's true. But I think it's reasonable. I think it's very reasonable. But let's keep this thing rolling at the 2-4. Um, see, I got to make these kind of unfortunately boring picks. I think Jeremy Bernard is probably reasonable here at the 2-4. He walks into a landing spot that's not very open, especially in year one. Michael Pittman Jr. is probably going to demand the most volume on the team. DK Metcalf in that complementary role as the downfield threat. And he's shown that he can demand volume when he's there by himself. So I think, while Bernard may or may not walk in as the primary slot, depending on how they want to deploy Pittman, I just don't see a path to immediate fantasy viability in year one. But in terms of contract situations for those two guys, one of them could be moved off of in the near future. That could open things up for Bernard. Also, McCarthy has shown a tendency to feature the slot guys in his offense before. So maybe Bernard gets a little bit more burn than I would expect. He kind of graded out as like a middling prospect for me in my wide receiver model. I think that can be maybe explained away by the situations that he was in. He was in Michigan State his first year behind Keon Coleman and Jaden Reed. Then he went to Washington behind Adunze, Jalen McMillan, Polk, that group. And then he went to Alabama behind Ryan Williams. So there was always, kind of high end competition for him. Maybe he would have produced better outside of that. But yeah, I guess that's all I got.
no, I agree. I wish he had landed somewhere with, I feel like, what would have been like more creative play calling. Like I would have
Yeah,
loved the San Francisco landing spot,
that would have
but
been fun.
we got what we got here.
Yeah, it's tough.
Speaking of San Francisco, that's going to roll into my next pick. I'm taking Stribling here.
Okay.
I don't know a ton about the guy. I still have to do more research about him as a player. We know he's great at blocking, and that was a primary reason why he was drafted as high as he was. And that's part of the reason why I'm taking him here because he was drafted with the first pick of the second round, and he's going to Kyle Shanahan, who is notorious for taking guys I've never heard of and turning them into fantasy relevant players. Just
Yeah.
because he is that good of a play caller, he's good at putting people in the right positions. And I'm hoping that this is more of that. So I'm not making this pick because I'm confident in Stribling himself, but I'm confident that Kyle Shanahan can make it happen.
I don't mind it. I think it's reasonable. I had him just a little bit later, but not by much. And considering where we are in the draft, I can't argue with you. I think that's totally fair. At the 2-6, this might also be an out there pick, although he is sitting highest on Sleeper's ADP. I'm going to go with Nick Singleton. I think there's a wide range of outcomes here. I think he could easily totally flame out of the league. I think that his vision and his ability to execute the play as called is questionable. And I think that might frustrate some coaching staffs, some running back coaches, stuff like that. But I think his upside is also quite high. In terms of his pedigree, I believe he was a 5-star guy. He was the RB1 in his class coming out of high school, I'm pretty sure. And like, from a Devi perspective, he was considered to be very, very highly thought of. Um, his college career didn't kind of go as a lot of people expected. Got supplanted by Katron Allen this past year. Dealt with some injuries here and there as well. Um, but he's big, athletic, and can catch passes. And if a guy with those three things can get opportunity, that can lead to fantasy success. Pollard probably won't be around for much longer. I think that he probably, at least from a size perspective, like he can do a lot of things that Tyjae Spears can do, but maybe handle some of the in between the tackle work that other teams wouldn't trust Tyjae Spears to do. So in the near future, I think that he could have some upside. Certainly not going to guarantee it though.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those. We get one every year now. I feel like for the last couple of years, he's like this year's Braylon Allen or this year's Ollie Gordon, where it's a guy who was highly touted, kind of fell off a little bit. Yeah. We're hoping to see them kind of get that back. So I do like this pick. It's around where I had him as well.
All right, take us to the 2-7.
To the 2-7, I'm looking at one of your guys here. Actually, I'm looking at Ted Hurst.
Ooh, breaking him in early. I love it.
Yeah, looking at Ted Hurst. Okay. I like the landing spot a lot out there in Tampa Bay. In terms of like the target competition, Mike Evans is no longer there. So he's really just competing with, of course, Emeka Egbuka is going to probably get the bulk of things. But Chris Godwin's still there. Some of the younger guys, you have McMillan that's still there as well. You got Tez Johnson. But in terms of playing on the outside, he's probably one of the first options they're going to have for actually lining up on the outside of the field and taking those reps. And Baker Mayfield out there, quarterback. I could see some things happening, especially just that style of play. Baker likes to create a lot of broken plays as well. I think there's just a lot of opportunity for splash plays with Ted Hurst, at the very least.
100%. I love it. I didn't even have him this early. And like you said, he's one of my guys, one of my favorites to evaluate this year. Went to a small school. He's a Georgia State guy, but really productive. And at 6'4", I think right around 200 pounds, like he's way more well-rounded of a receiver than you would expect. He's not just a jump ball guy. He's can run the full route tree and can get it done in the short and intermediate areas as well. Yeah, I think you explained the landing spot really well. He can potentially walk into the primary X role right away. That might not lead to the most volume immediately, but with a guy that I like this much, I'm willing to bet on it for sure.
Absolutely. Who do you have in this next slot?
2-8. I don't know if this is going to be a surprise. Is he? I might go position specific. Yeah, Eli Raridan is who I'm going to pull up here at the 2-8. He got a phenomenal landing spot, in my opinion. I did like him as a prospect. I didn't have him nearly this high. I think he's really well-rounded in terms of what he brings to the football field. He can block really well, so there's no concern about issues with whether he can play in line or not. He can stay on the field at all times. And I thought he had a decent enough receiving profile to warrant a selection up here. But the big thing is he lands with the Patriots. He's tied to Drake May. And I think Austin Hooper's gone. Hunter Henry's still there. So maybe the immediate viability isn't the greatest, although I do expect them to run some 12 personnel. And so he could find himself on the field in 2 tight end sets. And I don't think that Hunter Henry is going to be there for very much longer. So he could be the primary tight end on a Drake May offense as soon as 2027, maybe. I would put him as like, with the current setup in the offense, he'd be the second target. Like, that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree, especially in tight end premium. With that kind of upside, I think this is a guy you definitely take a swing on, especially in round 2. In this round 2, especially.
In this round 2, no doubt. All right, let's keep it going. What you got for us?
All right. I'm going to take a swing here on a guy that I think could have some opportunity and a good offense as well. And it may also be a homer pick as well, but I'm looking at Katron Allen here.
Okay.
I just feel as if, he landed with Washington. And in terms of just that running back room as a whole, I mean, you got Bill at the front, and then you've got Rachaad White, who just signed a 1-year, $2 million deal. And you got Katron Allen, who, one, is going to be a pretty good change of pace back if things weren't to work out with Rachaad White there immediately. But in terms of what we saw last year with Penn State, where Nick Singleton kind of struggled, he was able to find a little bit of success in what was, a bit of a chaotic offense. And honestly, I feel like that might translate over a little bit well from the running back position, just being able to be flexible and still work out in those situations if things aren't going well for the team. But in terms of just skill sets, he called himself mini Bijan Robinson. I'm not ready to give himself, that kind of
Yeah.
comparison at all. But he does bring a similar skill set when it comes to catching the ball, when it comes to being able to hit those zone plays to the outside. I just think he is a good fit for this offense. It's just a matter of when he's going to get that opportunity.
Yeah, I can't argue with it. I didn't have him quite this high, but I totally understand it. Like it's within the range of of outcomes that by the end of the year he's the RB1. Like it's a very uncertain backfield that they have there, and so I wouldn't put it past him to earn that role. And I think at the 2.9 in this class, it's hard to shoot for better than that.
Absolutely.
All right, I finally get to take somebody I'm like genuinely interested in. Elijah Surratt at the
Yes.
210. He gets drafted a little bit later than some of the receivers that are still available on the board. But I think he walks into a great situation in Baltimore, which sounds weird to say because I know in years past that we've been afraid of, our favorite wide receiver prospects landing in Baltimore and kind of going there to die. But I think he profiles as a big slot. And I think that this team has already kind of told us, the public, that that's where they want to use him. And I think that's perfect. Zay Flowers, even at his size, is an outside guy. He's like an X or Z. Rashad Bateman can fill the opposite side of the field. And then Elijah Surratt in that big slot, I think can absorb a lot of volume. I think he fills a complementary role in this offense that they didn't have. Like that skill set isn't something that they already possessed. And so I think there's opportunity there. I think he can get a lot of work in the red zone as a jump ball guy, although they did also draft Jacoby Lane technically ahead of him, who could also kind of be that red zone threat. So we'll have to see there. But I think he can really work in as like a prominent featured role in one of the best offenses in the league. Certainly downside for that just not to be the case at all, but I'm willing to take that risk here.
Absolutely. I think there's some people who would probably even argue that at some points during last season, he was the better receiver out of the two between him and Omar Cooper Jr.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that he's also just more consistent. With that consistency and him playing in that slot role as a big slot, I could see him actually finding a lot of success out there.
Yeah. And just from like an analytical perspective, his profile was way cleaner than Omar Cooper Jr. He produced at every single spot that he went. There were also some red flags in terms of like contested catch rate and things of that nature. But
if he's out the slot, you're not really expecting a whole lot of jump ball contested catch opportunities, really.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
I
yeah,
love that pick.
Let's get almost rounded out here. Who you got for us at the penultimate choice?
At the penultimate choice, good word. I'm looking at Emmett Johnson here.
Okay, I dig
landed
it.
with Kansas City. Obviously, he's going to be behind K9, so he's not going to get any burn immediately. But I will say, in terms of that change of pace, sort of passing back role, there isn't really a ton of competition for him there. It's like him and Brashard Smith are going to be the two competing for that. And if I would take one over the other, I would probably go with Emmett Johnson myself. I think he's a more well-rounded player. I think he's someone who could handle that. And he's someone that if K9 were to see, some sort of injury, he has a lot of injury upside as well because he can carry the workload and be that sort of RB1. He was also the RB2 in this class prior to the combine and things got a lot muddier. So I'm optimistic, but again, this is what we got to do at this point in this draft. Is this round not feeling like round 3 to you?
Oh, it absolutely it has since the middle of it.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, no, for sure. I like it. I had him just barely into the third round, but again, this is all just kind of one big jumbled up tier at this point. I think you can absolutely make the argument for Emmett Johnson. And yeah, I like the landing spot. So I'll close this out, and then I think we'll have an opportunity to talk about maybe some honorable mentions that maybe deserve to be in the second round conversation. But I will end it with a guy that unfortunately I'm not the biggest fan of, Zachariah Branch. But I think he walks into a good situation there in Atlanta. I think he could be the number 2 target almost immediately, especially if the rumors about Kyle Pitts getting moved are true. If he stays, then I don't anticipate that he would be the second target, but could be the wide receiver too, at the very least. I don't think that he's like a true well-rounded receiver. I don't think he's the best route runner. I don't think he does that great of work downfield. He's more of a gadget guy. But considering the quarterbacks that they have on this roster, whether it be Tua or Penix, I think that could actually be a pretty good match where they need kind of those short around the line of scrimmage targets. I think that he could be electric with the ball in his hands in that category. And from like a dynasty longevity of value perspective, I think that he's going to be a great return guy. And so it's not like he's not going to make a roster. Like he's going to be on a team because of his ability to shine in that aspect. And then he'll have more opportunity to earn a role as like a traditional wide receiver.
No, I 100% agree. I think he's going to be one of those guys. This is at least it's not a great pick or like in terms of fantasy, it's not one you're super happy about, but this is one that you're kind of excited about. This is a fun pick. He's a guy that if he gets the ball in his hands, it's really fun to watch him play. So
certainly,
I think this is honestly, probably the best landing spot he could have gotten in terms of quarterback play.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, for sure. All right, so that'll do it for our actual mock. But I'll throw to you if you have any guys that are kind of honorable mentions that you wanted to at least bring up.
Someone that I almost put here in the second round, I almost put Malachi Fields here in the second round. Just because he landed in New York, there's not a ton of target competition behind Malik Neighbors, and it stands to be seen how they're going to use Isaiah Likely. Isaiah Likely could very well be the number 2 target, but even still, Malachi Fields being sort of the big body field stretcher that he could be on this offense, complemented with Malik Neighbors being the everything else for this offense, I think there is still a role for Malachi Fields in a place for him to really grow into being someone who can get those big splash plays for New York.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Anybody else you want to bring up? I got a couple names, but
somebody else I thought about, but I think he's probably going to end up going later. I was thinking about Skylar Bell just because I've heard that's strictly just because I've heard Steve Smith talk about him as much as I have. And also the fact that he landed in Buffalo. So if there was any place that he was going to thrive at, it would be here. But also he's a slot receiver on a team with like 4 other slot receivers. So I just don't know if or when he's going to get that opportunity just because things are kind of stacked that way for him. But at least just an interesting upside pick.
Yeah, no, I've seen some film evaluators be really high on him. And so just considering this class, I think that might be enough in this landing spot to be worth, taking a flyer on him for sure. Some of the guys that I had kind of right around this range, certainly not exciting, but Carson Beck in the Superflex League has a chance to start games this year. I think, honestly, I would bet on him starting a game if there was like a half a game over-under bet to make, considering Jacoby Brissett and the state of that roster. I'd be willing to make that bet. And so as soon as he gets on the field, his price is going to go up, even if you don't want to retain him on your roster. If you just want to take that opportunity once he gets a start to try to trade him, that's totally fine with me. And I think that's a reasonable way to go about it. And I think that might be reason enough to take him at the back end of the second, early third. Who else do I have in here? I think Max Clare deserves to get talked about. The team is fun, and they've shown a propensity to use tight ends, but he walks into a crowded tight end room there with Colby Parkinson. They also have Ferguson, who they drafted last year, and seems like he's probably set up for a more prominent featured role. They still have Tyler Higbee. It seems like this team wants to run a lot of 13 personnel so that Max Clare has an opportunity to get on the field, but I just don't know that the fantasy viability is that great. But good draft capital, tied to Sean McVay. Hard to really argue with that, I think. That's probably all the names I want to shout out. Like Oscar Delp, Chris Brazzell, Brennan Thompson are fun, but they're going to be later round guys.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So I think that will do it for us. If you guys stuck with us until the end, as always, we appreciate you. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like on it. If you want to let us know what you thought about our mock draft, if you agree, disagree, drop something down in the comments for us. That would be great. And if you want to stay up to date with all of our latest releases, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We'd really appreciate y'all. But I think that'll do it, and we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.
Peace.